Hi there, thanks so much for coming along to Celia's latest, number 14 of 16 of the What, Why and How workshops. This is also a free preview as well. Celia's given me permission to share. This is about a little bit more to do with those brushes. We've already had a session on brushes. This is where we go a little bit further. And for each of these sessions, Celia also produces a wonderful optional guide. This reinforces what you cover in the session, but also allows you to take your learning a little bit further as well. And the last thing to mention is that later on this year, Celia is back with another series. This time, we're moving on from tools. We're looking at menus and panels in the same level of intricate detail that we really, really enjoy. Hey Celia, 14 of 16. How quickly has this gone? I'm actually really sad, but we're nearly there.
Far too fast. And I've been to all 14, by the way, so far.
Oh, well done. Me too.
Just thought I'd mention it. Yeah.
Thank you. Please do kick off whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Great to see you on this Monday lunchtime in the UK and wherever you're joining from throughout the world. This workshop is the second part of the brushes workshop, which we did as week 2. So on week 2, I looked at how the brush tool works and how important it is to understand the brush tool, because it's the basis of a large number of other tools in Photoshop. So have a look at that particular recording if you haven't seen it so far. And in this one, I just want to take the brushes a step further, which is why my screen looks a little cluttered with 2 panels. There's the brushes toolbar itself, which is on the right-hand side of my screen. And this is a duplicate of what we would also achieve if you had moved your mouse onto the main toolbar, having selected the brush tool from the left-hand side, pressing the letter B. Then all of our properties and options for brushes run across the top of the interface. And when I click the little size of the brush that I'm currently using, you'll see that we get this drop down, which I've talked about, which is important because it gives us not only the size of the brush that we're using, whether or not the hardness, the edge of the brush can be adjusted or not. And with certain brushes, they can't, which is why this one's grayed out. You can also squash a brush so that it becomes a different shape. And important to use brushes effectively or efficiently, you do want to make sure that from the cog, which sits on the right-hand side of that brushes panel, that you have ticked brush name, brush stroke, brush tip, show search bar. And if you want to be able to toggle quickly backwards and forwards between the last 8 brushes that you've used, that you've got the show recent brushes ticked as well. Now, these are all important because they help you to work with brushes much more efficiently. But as I've just said, on the right-hand side of my screen, so that I can have access to my brushes without having to go up to that particular drop-down, under the window menu, you also have 2 panels, which is brush settings and brushes. It's the brushes panel that you're looking at on the right-hand side. And then the brush settings is the panel on the left-hand side, which is going to give us all the additional information about how the brush that we're about to use is set up and its properties. I'll now breathe. Any questions, Mark?
No, we haven't had any questions so far. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I'm going to open both of those panels and keep them open because it saves me having to keep going back up to the top of the brushes toolbar and keep selecting from that drop down. So they'll be nice and clear all the time. Now, if you look at the right-hand side, you'll see that I've got a very large number of folders of brushes, many of which have been downloaded from the Adobe website. And anyone that's been following me on Conversations will know that a few weeks ago, I put up a post to say that Photoshop appeared to be not offering most of the Kyle Webster additional brushes, which you've always been able to get through your subscription. This, however, seems to have been reinstated. Wonderful. I hope they were looking at Conversations website when we all had a quick grumble about it. So in a second, I will show you how to get to them quickly. You will need to make sure that you are logged into your Adobe account. Otherwise, you'll have to go through all that. So I have made sure that I've got everything ready to show you. Now, so these brushes, before we go into downloading any brushes and using them, I'm going to just show you that if you are going to make your own brushes, duplicate existing brushes, download Adobe brushes, buy brushes in from other companies, be careful where you buy your brushes from. A lot of people sort of help themselves to brushes, so just make sure they're coming from an ethical source. Now, on the right-hand side of the brushes panel, there is a menu button, which is exactly the same as the cog that you would get if you'd click the drop down for the size of the brush. And it's in here that we are able to create new brush groups. So new brush groups are basically just creating another folder. So as you create brushes and you want to store them properly and organize them so that you can also back them up, I would recommend that you just perhaps try this out when you've next got a few minutes. I'm going to click on new brush group, and the dialog box that comes up is what do you want to call the brush? So I'll call it conversation brushes, and I'm going to click OK. Now that folder will now appear in the bottom of my brushes panel. It can be picked up and moved around. Be careful if you move it around that you don't drop it into an existing folder. Do make sure that you can see the blue line that runs between existing folders, otherwise it'll disappear inside another folder, and then you have to find it and drag it back out again. So I've just dragged it between winter brushes and winter 2020. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually show you how to make a brush and what brushes consist of, why I would want this brush, and then I'll save it into this folder. So a brush is made up of purely black or any shade of grey marks or pixels. Anything that's white or transparent is never saved as part of a brush. You can also make a brush with coloured pixels, but those coloured pixels are just then interpreted as a grey scale of those particular shades. So in a minute, I'll just show you what happens if we make a brush based on the Alstroemeria flower that you can see in front of you. But I have a brush which allows me just to stamp my signature anywhere I like onto any layer in Photoshop. And I'm just going to select the brush tool from the left-hand side and just increase the size of, or rather decrease the size of the brush for a moment. Guess who's got the caps lock on again? Anybody that's following my pointer will know that all you can see is a hair cross.
We thought that was a test.
It was a test. That's for Gina, who missed one session. Gina, all right. So let me just increase that brush size again. So now you can see that this is my brush. It's just got my name on it. And I've made this brush, and I'm going to quickly show you how to make it. And then I'll store that brush into the Conversations brushes folder. So the reason I have this brush is that if I wanted to stamp my signature onto a new layer of the Alstroemeria, I'll come down to the bottom of the layers panel, select the new layers panel, and just click, and I've just typed my name. Now, of course, my name can be typed, or rather used with any colours that I choose. So I might want to pick a colour from the Alstroemeria with the eyedropper and click OK, and I'll increase the size of my brush. And I'll even rotate it. I'm going to go with my cursor left key on my keyboard and just put it at a nice jaunty angle, smack bang across that image. And for those of you that don't know how to rotate the head of your brush really quickly, Edit menu for Windows users, Photoshop menu for Mac users, down to your preferences, into your tools preferences. And please make sure that if you want to work with brushes, that you've just ticked this tiny option which says arrow keys will rotate your brush tip. All you have to do is then just tap the left or right cursor key, and you can spin any brush round in any direction. And if we go up to the properties toolbar across the top of the screen, you can see that my rotation is set to 25 degrees. I put it back to 0, press the enter key, then my brush will be back in that angle. So now I'm going to quickly show you how to make this brush. I do hope people are not already aware of all of this and you're not losing 10 minutes of your useful lunch breaks, people. So let's create a brush. I'll just start with a new document. All right, let's just do a new layer, nice and quick. So I'll just go back down to the bottom of the layers panel and fill the layer with white. I'll go for edit, fill. And by the way, there are loads of keyboard shortcuts, Control and Backspace, Shift and F5 fills with a particular color. And we can look at those later on perhaps, but I'll fill the contents of this layer with white. So I've already said to you that anything that's white will never ever be picked up on a brush. So we can use that as a clean background, and then we can put any shade of black right through from any luminosity value right down to anything that is not exactly pure white. Right, I'm going to use the typing tool. So I'm going to select the type tool, horizontal type tool. I'm going to pick a font. Perhaps I'll go for a bit of a classy font. I'll go for Bickham Script, which is a bit classy. You might not have that one because it's one that I've downloaded from the Adobe website, but have a look at one of the other workshops previously if you want to know how to do that. So I'll just click on the document. Let's go for a 48-point font, single click, and I'll type, oops, guess who's got that set to center aligned. Let's just click that text, set it to left. And also I'll just check that the font is actually pure black 000 in the hexadecimal values, the quickest way to ensure that you are working with pure black as your color. Right, let's try that again. So Celia, just in case I can't remember my surname, I've just typed it in here. So this is black marks on a white background, and I want to save that as a brush. I'll just tick. So on the document, this is the only layer that's going to be formed as part of my brush. Now, there are two ways to define a brush. You can either be very specific and use one of the marquee tools to specify that the area that I'm about to drag around is to be turned into a brush. But because Photoshop will only recognize the black pixels, I actually don't need to mark an area, but let me show it to you anyway. So I'll select the marquee tool and I'll click and drag around that area. I've got some feathering on in case you're wondering why the marquee tool is coming out as a more of an elliptical shape. I want to show you how we can make some really interesting brushes with the feathering on. So I put the feathering on a little earlier this morning, but I'm now going to click on Edit and define my brush preset. So it's just the area in the marquee that's going to be selected. The size of the brush is going to be 996 pixels wide. 5,000 is the largest you can have for a brush. And I'm going to rename that brush Celia Signature Conversations. Where's the brush going to go? If I just click OK, it's just going to end up at the very bottom of my brushes panel. But if I'm more careful and I should have done that before I started. I can't select the folder once I've started naming it, so I'll have to move it, which is great because it means I've got to show you how to move it. So I'm going to click OK. The brush is made. You can see that it's dropped down into the bottom of the brushes panel. I'm going to take the selection off from the marquee, Control or Command and D. My brush is now actually being selected automatically, but I do want to move that brush and get my housekeeping in order before I move on. So I'm going to come down and find that brush in my brushes panel, single click on it, and I'm going to drag it up and carefully make sure it goes within the blue frame so it drops into my Conversations brushes. Mark, you've got that face on, which means I've got a question.
I do have a question, but
Yeah,
only when you're ready. Only when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, so Avril's just asked a really good question as well. So you've mentioned the fact that it looks for pure black or white, or looks for the black in the image. Avril's just said, if you've got some birds that are perhaps flying across, say, an orange sunset sky, and you wanted to make a brush of the birds, is that the same kind of process of selecting them and it would just look for the darker pixels? And it may be something that
I'm just about to cover it.
Yeah, okay. So thanks very much, Avril, as well.
Fabulous question, Avril. And there is a flock of birds in the resources that is in the Google Drive on a grey background so that you can see exactly what happens, because the chances of you having a pure white background or a transparent background from the pixels you want to select are usually pretty zilch. So I'm going to cover that in just a second. Are you guys happy with the fact that we have created this brush. I have moved it. And if we go across to the brush settings, you'll see that there's very little that has a tick in the brush settings because I haven't applied anything other than a basic brush tick. That's all it is. And that is the brush. Happy with that, peeps? So if I wanted to recolor it, and I can change my color, and I can now put that on in a variety of different colors. We can still use the size options in order to be able to make it larger or smaller. That's a very small me, and I don't want to make me any bigger because I'm big enough already. All good?
Absolutely. And Danielle's just asked a quick question just before we move on. In an image like this or in an example like this where you've chosen a font that perhaps has some imperfections in the font itself, as in it might have some small gaps in the letters or some white areas, would the brush see through those white areas? Would you still be only getting this sort of the darker areas?
Yes. Yeah. If I was to put in a new layer, everyone's going, oh, why did you ask that question? Now she's going to rab it on again a bit longer. But so if I just fill that layer up with a completely different color. Okay, so I've got a red layer, just put that at the top, and I'll use a bright blue, and I'll use that brush at a reasonably large size. And you'll see as I click, is that clear enough? Sorry, red on blue is not very good if anybody's got visual impairments, but you can see the little bit inside the E is hollow, so it only picks up the black pixels.
Yep, thanks very much for Danielle for that question as well. Thank you.
Okay. Right, now I also want to point out to you at this stage, if you look at the brush in the brushes panel, it has no symbol against it whatsoever. Whereas the majority of brushes that you download, if I click on these winter brushes that I've downloaded, you can see that they've all got this little symbol on them in the right-hand corner. And that symbol tells you that that can only be used when you actually have the paintbrush selected. And there are other symbols. Sorry, I can't find one. There we go. Let me just find. Yes. So if we look at some of these. Oh, this is being very tricky. They're all brushes. Nothing's giving me anything different. There we go. No, can you see on the screen the top list of the brushes? The Kyle's Real Oils has got a paintbrush with a teardrop. That means it can only be used with the mixer brush. The next one down can only be used with the smudge tool. So these brushes, when you download them, have specific tools that they have to work with. But these are important to know about because I'm going to show you how you can change them to make them really even more useful. Okay, so far, everyone. Okay, let me show you where the brushes are that you can download because they're such good fun to play with. I'm also just going to take my mouse up to the properties panel at the top because every time I move my mouse around, it's wandering around with my name on it, and I've learned my name now. So I'm going to right click over the preset button next to the house and just click reset tool. And that will ensure that the brush is set back to the default 13 pixel round soft brush. Right, how do you download the brushes? Well, we need to have access to the Adobe website. So make sure you're connected to internet, etc. So when you click the drop down on the right-hand side of the brushes panel and it says get more brushes, it will open up this dialog, this web page, sorry. I'm in the United Kingdom, so I can just accept that. And then Adobe have changed the page again. And it will tell you that it will make your mark with Photoshop brushes. What you have to do is to scroll down through all the advertising blurb. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And now they've added all the brushes back again at the bottom of this page. So if you decided that you would love to have all of these impressionist brushes, and oh my goodness, these are just stunning, these brushes, you click the download button. I'll click the download button. Providing you are logged in, it will immediately download that set of brushes. So I hope you can see on my screen as a Windows user, it's downloading the impressionist.abr folder of brushes. Sorry for you Mac users. I'm just going to click onto my file explorer. So wherever your downloads end up, you will find that the very last thing that I downloaded was those Impressionist brushes. And if I now want to install those into Photoshop, I do the following. Let me just move this downloads out of the way for a second. I'll move this web page out of the way. And then back in Photoshop, on that same drop down, I've got the option to import my brushes. Import brushes. Where do you want to import them from? I want to import them from my downloads. So I will click on the download folder and choose load. And now within a few seconds, if we go to the bottom of the brushes panel, I've now got all these amazing Impressionist brushes. And if we look at these brushes, they are all there. And some of them are smudgy brushes and some of them are actual paint brushes. Anybody, any questions before I go on?
Not specifically about brushes, so no. I'll hold on to the question I've got because it's not about brushes. Thank you. So nice that these are back or available, by the way.
Oh, I don't know what happened, but it was about a month where they were just not available. Okay. Right, now let's look at, I might go straight to, no, let me go next to an image. I'm just going to delete the layers in this document. Supposing I had some burning desire to actually save the whole of this Alstroemeria as a brush, providing that brush is no more than 5,000 pixels wide, which is why I've switched my ruler on. Control and R, Command and R switches the ruler on so that you can see the size of the document you're working with. And a right click on the ruler allows you to just choose which unit of measurement you want to use. So I'll choose pixels. Now I want to make that into a brush. So all I need to do, because it's got a white background, is to go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. If I only wanted a small section of it, I would have used one of the marquee tools or any kind of selection tool in order to make a selection, and only the selection would be saved as a brush. So I'll define that as a brush preset, and I'll just call that Alstro, and I'll click OK. And again, I should have been more careful and made sure that I had already opened up the Conversations folder first, but we know how to move it, so I won't move it again. So now this Alstro brush has been created, and it will have converted all of the pixels of the Alstroemeria into shades of grey. So if we add a new layer and fill that with white, and I click, I've got blue paint in my foreground. I'm going to be painting all the shades of the grayscale shades of that particular image, but it hasn't picked up any pixel that is white or transparent. Obviously, if I was to click and drag, it's a brush. So it's literally behaving as a round brush would behave. The more I click and drag, the more it's going to put more imprints down. Happy for me to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. We just had a quick question from Rosemary about the limit of brushes that you can be held in the folder, or that can be held in the folder. Is there a limit? I've heard it's a
Yes,
big limit.
it is a big limit. And I have written a tiny handout somewhere on the absolute maximum size and backing up your brushes, because the minute you go over the limit, not only does it stop you allowing them to be stored, it can actually stop your brushes from working.
Wow.
And actually, I've just realised what an important piece of information that is. I'll send it to you, Mark, at the end
Yeah,
of the
of course.
session.
Okay.
What I tend to do is I do download all the brushes as soon as Adobe bring them out. But this is an important part of brushes, so let's do it now. When I've decided that perhaps I don't use them that frequently, I will right-click over a folder and export that folder to a completely separate backup area on either a hard drive or somewhere else on my computer. So when I click export selected brushes, that's the Keith Haring brushes, Then I choose where I'm going to put it. So I would just grab a folder. I'll stick it in the Learn Photoshop and stick it in there and name it. And save that folder of brushes. It still stays in here, but now I can actually right click over it and I can delete that entire group, because I can always import it again by going back to the menu at the top and choosing import brushes. Do get into good habits of backing them up, and do move out the ones that you really don't use that often. Okay.
Super, thank you.
Right, now, if anybody watched the amazing, wonderful, fantastic Cherry last night on Conversations, you will know that she creates the most amazing square brushes. And so I also create square brushes. I'm not pinching her ideas, I promise you. So I thought I would show you a technique for creating a brush which has built into it any kind of texture that you might then want to place behind a flower, a vase, etc., or anything for that matter. So I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to open. And I've just popped a couple of extra images into the Google Drive this morning. By the way, Avril, your flock of birds is coming up next. It's over here. So I'm just going to grab this this texture. It's called Texture 2, and I've just put it into your Google Drive. So this is just some cracked paint that I photographed. And sometimes we use images as textures to go over or behind other layers. But if this is one that you want to use on a regular basis, we can save it as a brush. Now, let me just move these panels slightly for a second. Just pop those over there. Now, if I was going to make a brush from this, I would use the marquee tool. If you set the feathering of the marquee to its default of 0 and make a brush by clicking and dragging. So that's a rectangular brush. It's 2,500 pixels wide. I've selected it with the marquee tool, and I'm just going to click Edit, Define Brush Preset. Texture square brush. And again, I should have selected the conversation folder before I started. Let's click OK. Right, now let me quickly look at a new layer. Just deselected, by the way. Oh, why don't I set my keyboard shortcut up? Right, so now I've got this square brush. And if I use that bright blue colour and click, I've then applied that brush. But there's another way of making a square brush which doesn't make it quite so defined. Let's delete this layer. Am I going too fast, or am I going too slowly, or am I going okay?
Absolutely perfect speed, thank you.
Okay, so if you use the feathering option, you get a brush which has a really lovely soft edge, and it also softens the entire texture very slightly. So I'm going to put my feathering to about 100 pixels, bearing in mind that the marquee that I'm going to create is only about 3,000 pixels wide. So we're going to get some quite strong feathering around the edge of that marquee, which is why you should be able to see this semicircular or curved area, because it's actually softening the edge of the brush, and it also softens the outside area as well. So if we now define this as a brush, Edit, Define Brush Preset, softer version. Obviously, your naming convention needs to be a lot stronger than that. And I'll click OK. And now again, we'll just add another layer quickly to the document, and I'll deselect what we're doing and fill this with white. Okay, so now if I use that brush, this has got a soft edge. So when I click, we don't get that harshness. And that's your choice. But I find a slightly softer edged brush can work really nicely. Obviously, you can't use the brush for clicking and dragging. Well, you can, but in this particular instance, we're going to get a much, much stronger impression of it. I love making brushes. I think I could just make brushes forever and never even use them, probably.
We'd all come and watch you.
How cool is that? So I've written in the pack that goes with these. I've shown you how to do that and talked about the feather property. So there's lots of reminders because I know I'm gabbling a bit because I like to get through as much as I possibly can. Now, Avril, are you listening? This one's for you. So we need to we're going to need to make a selection of some birds, but the birds are flying across a pretty grotty sky, which was quite grey. And I'm going to show you how we can make a flock of birds at different sizes, and we're going to improve the background. So let me open the birds. Let's just move these out of the way. I'm going over to the brush and right-clicking to reset it because it's driving me bonkers. Now we've got all sorts of different things that we could do in order to remove the grey background, but you're going to have to remove the grey background because if I was just to demonstrate that we selected that flock of birds and said edit, define brush preset, and I'll just save that as bad birds and click OK. That's the size of the brush. And if I was to use that on a clean layer, you can see that it's picked up the background. So we need to get rid of the background. Now, in the, I think in the pack that I've given you, yes, in the pack, well, I haven't given it to you, there are several ways that we can reduce the image down to pure black and white. We've got tools that enable us just to work with the black and white adjustment layers. We can use levels, we can use thresholds, we can use channels, but yes, Avril, you need to get rid of the background. So let me show you a quick method for getting rid of the background. One of the things you could do would just be to have a go at using levels. Not particularly good because it'll probably remove quite a lot of detail. Adjust image adjustments and levels, and bring the whites up. And you really want to drag it as far as you can without actually losing too much detail of those silhouettes of those birds. But by doing that, you now have removed as much of that grey as you possibly can, and that will give you the opportunity of doing that. Does that sort of help? But we need to remove the background so that the pixels that you're going to create are going to be good enough for what we're doing. Does that raise any questions?
No questions on that one. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the ways that I would have done this would actually have been to use the magic wand tool. So I would select the magic wand tool, and because it's a fairly consistent range of greys, I'm just going to click. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what I've just clicked on and what I've done there. Oh yeah, I can see exactly what I've done. So I've clicked, I've selected all the grey pixels, and I'm just going to fill that area with white, deselect it, and now I've got something which would make a reasonably good brush. How are we doing?
Absolutely perfect. Which was your preferred method? Because obviously you'd risk the details on the levels, but what would your preferred method be on this one?
I probably, if it was something really important, I would go into channels, and I'm going to cover channels on a more in-depth workshop. But if I'm doing this really quickly, one of the other ones that works really well is image adjustments and threshold. And when you use threshold, again, you might be a little bit careful because you could end up with some crunchy edges. But threshold converts an image not just to black and white, but to pure black and pure white, so that you can increase and decrease the amount of blacks and whites in the image, and that will guarantee to give you a totally clean background for a brush.
Avril has just said that they think the magic wand will work best because the sky is really, really strong in colour.
Yeah.
Interesting. Avril, share on the Facebook group what you managed to get your brushes. I'd love to see people's brushes. It'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So now I've got the I could make a flock of birds. So I'm going to make a flock of birds because I wanted to show you how we can do something called shape dynamics. So let me use the marquee tool and just select. And again, it doesn't matter how big or small it is because the white pixels are going to be ignored, don't forget. So let's just select that. Keep on, I've left the feathering on. I never have feathering on. I'm sorry, I'm just going to deselect, set that back to 0. Okay, so let's define a brush. Edit, define brush presets. Flock of birds. Okay. Right. And we'll go to a new document quickly. I could go to an existing document, of course. Now I want to put my flock of birds on. Now, the flock of birds, of course, normally I would now select something like a fairly dark colour, a dark charcoaly grey, because if I put those birds on now, that's sort of the way that we would see them. If you're coming back next week and I do the magic mixer brush with you, we'll be able to save these birds with a variety of shades of colour in them as well, which makes a fantastic brush. So if I put that flock of birds on and I click again, I'm going to get all these birds at exactly the same size. But we could use one of our brush settings now. So let's bring the brush settings panel into play. So every time I use the brush and every time I click, I'm going to want the brush to give me the brushes at a slightly different size. So I'm going to select the shape dynamics. You need to make sure that you click the word shape dynamics as well as the tick box, because if we then say, when we use this brush, let's adjust the size every time we click. So I'll push the size jitter up. So what it does, it doesn't increase the size of the brush, even if I take it to 100%. What it will do is, because the size of the brush at the moment is 2,600 pixels, it means that it might give me 4 birds at 2,600, but it might also give me 4 birds at much, much smaller sizes. And if I want to make sure that I don't get sort of wrens as well as swans flying across my document, I'll probably restrict the size that it can go down to. So it can't go down to, say, less than half of the original size. So 50% would be the original size. So now when I click, and the next time I click, I get them at different sizes. So we can create a flock, but the flock looks a little different. We could also apply just a tiny bit of scattering. It's a bit difficult working with a brush that's got all these birds on it. Let me just right click and reset the tool. So I click scattering, and every time we click, perhaps we want 2 sets of birds. So I'll change the count value, and I'd like them to be slightly scattered, possibly on both axes. So now when I click, oh, I've gone back without me. I haven't got my birds. I've gone for a straightforward. That's better. Let's go back to the flock of birds. Try changing the scattering properly. Scattering to, I'm sorry, I was changing the scattering of a soft round brush, but it won't matter because with Photoshop, it just resets your brush each time. So let's have a flock of birds, and let's put the spacing out a bit. So the brush tip, we can space them out a bit more. And with the shape dynamics, we'll change the size a bit too. So I've now created something quite crazy, but when I click, I should have got a range of birds flying around. Yeah, that's better. So we can create all sorts of things with our shape and brush settings. Was that okay? I rather rattled through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Danielle's just asked a quick question. Because you picked four birds to make this brush with, would you always end up with four birds every time you click that brush?
I
If
would
you
make it
wanted to
with
have
one.
fewer, you'd have to create one with two brushes, wouldn't you? For
Yeah,
example.
yeah. I would probably create 2 or 3 different brushes with them closer together, further apart, and then I've got lots of ways that I can use these.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to play though, isn't it?
Well, I hope you don't mind me playing because I think we're covering new stuff each time. So because I've changed all the settings of the original flock of birds, if I now go back to the menu on the right hand side, because I want to save this this new setting. So I'm going to come down to the bottom of the brush settings panel where you'll find just this plus button. I stupidly went to the, oh, I can go there. You can either go to the menu on the right hand side and choose new brush preset, or you can click the plus button at the bottom, which will do the same thing. But I'm now going to change the brush that we originally created and select new brush preset. Now, this time, instead of just getting the option to name the brush, we also get the option to say, do you want to capture the size in the preset? And yes, I do. And then this one, include the tool settings, means that it will remember exactly which tool I was using when I created this. So this is going to limit that brush, the set of birds, to only being able to be used with a brush tool. So I sometimes save it with the settings. I'll include the settings. And before I do that, I'm also going to show you that if I wanted a whole set of bright pink flamingos, for example, if I set the color to bright pink, and then when I save the brush preset as flock of birds or whatever you want to call it, include the tool settings, I can also save the solid color as well. Now on next week's setting, I'm going to show you that we can create a flock of birds which are all different colors. But now when I click OK and I use this, all our birds are going to be bright pink. And as I move around, we're getting different sizes, etc. How are you feeling, everybody? Are you completely worn out, or is this okay?
We love bright pink birds. It's difficult to say. I quite like the idea that you call one of the brushes Bad Birds. I just thought that was a great title for a brush.
Okay. Now, I have another brush that I'm really fond of. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, are you happy for me just to keep rabbiting?
No, again, more general questions, but nothing specific. So we can continue and I'll ask those questions at the end.
Okay, so as long as Avril's happy about the fact that you're going to have to get rid of your background, I'm just going to get rid of our birds now.
Danielle just said, what would naughty birds look like? This is not that kind of show, Danielle.
Oh, try that one next week. I promise you, we'll do naughty birds. Okay. So I've got another brush I want to show you, but a lot of people like creating brushes which can produce a sort of smoke, fog effects, and they can be made just out of clouds. In fact, let me do that one next because I might as well just work through the order in which things are here. So to make your own smoke, fog, cloud brushes, let's open up. I've sent there's a couple of images here. This one is clouds. So there we go. Not the most exciting image, but I just fired it up at the sky, the camera that was. And so I think on the pack it says open up the Lake District, but we can work with this one just as well. So with this one, I would convert the image to black and white, and I'll just do that straight away. Be careful that you don't destroy your images, and I'm doing everything here very non-destructively. So I'll just do an image adjustment, which is a destructive tool, and I wouldn't normally use this one, but we'll convert it to black and white. And by converting it to black and white, I can make it a bit stronger so that I can easily remove the blacks by just bringing up the blues quite a lot more so that we end up with this part, because I'm going to invert the image in a minute. So if I take the blues right up, just adjusting the yellows because it might give you a bit more texture in the clouds. Yeah, right, I'm going to click OK. Right, now I'm going to invert the image, because if I use image adjustments and invert, you'll remember that it's black pixels that make up our brushes, not white pixels. So now I'm going to just use a lasso tool and just drag around an area, just like that. If you want to make it more defined, you might want to go to levels. But having done that, I'm just literally going to edit, define brush preset, and make a cloud brush. Okay. And let's just try that on another document. I'm going to open up the Lake District image. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm going to change my brush color to white or a sort of pale grey and reduce the size of the brush. And let's just see. So the edge is much, much, much too harsh. So this is where I would have softened the edge by using feathering before I actually create it. So you can see how badly that's done it. But does this give you an idea that we could use this and just keep it at different levels of opacity? And we've got things that we can paint which look like smoke and cloud and all sorts of soft things. So if we come back to the brush, and where I've made the selection, I'm going to go to the select menu and modify it so that I can really feather that selection. And I'll do a feathering of something like, or at least 50. It might want even more than that. And I'll click OK. And then define that as a brush with Edit, Define Brush Preset. Let's try Better Cloud and click OK. Right, let's try that one. I hope this is going to work. That's better, much softer. So use your feathering whenever you make a selection if you want a much softer edge to the brush. For things like the birds, you're not going to want any kind of feathering. You want those really sharp and clear. Thank you, Gina. Yes, dark thundery clouds work really well as well. And then, of course, you've got the option of now going back into all the different brush settings so that while this brush is selected, we can then start to use another option here. So if you change the settings of the brush so that every time you use the brush, sorry, I want transfer, not texture. Transfer, every time we use the brush, we can use different opacity values. So we can make it very, very light, and we can use flow jitter as well, so that every time you click, you'll get a different level of opacity and flow. So again, it will look more realistic than having them all being at a consistency. How are we doing? We've got 10 minutes.
Well, it might be an idea for me just to drop in a couple of questions then, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say to everybody, there's been such lovely comments in the chat. Please do leave any comments that you'd like to share with Celia, and I will send the chat afterwards. And I know there might be a couple of people who are joining for the first time today as well, so welcome. Good one to join with lots of clouds. We do love clouds and naughty birds and bad birds. Kate just asked a question about the use of brushes in competitions, and I know this is often a topic that people bring up about whether they're allowed, whether they're not allowed. So Kate said, are downloadable brushes allowed in competitions? And that may be something we have or don't have experience with. Kate says they think not, but you can make your own for use in competitions, can't you?
Absolutely. I don't know the answer to the question because I would, for every competition I enter, I would always check the specific competition rules surrounding it. And if I'm unsure and I'm going to use a brush from Adobe, but you see, what's the difference between a soft round brush that Adobe provides and a concept brush that they provide? It's such a difficult area. And I feel that because you're in control of those pixels and where you put them and how you place them, that it's your work. I don't know the answer. I'm not going to bluff. I'm sorry.
No, 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 not at all. It's always one of those interesting questions. So thank you, thank you. And then Pauline asked a question earlier as well. Now, thanks very much for holding on, Pauline. This is when you were using your Celia Henderson brush text. We did love that, and we did love the colours you were using. Just going back to perhaps one of the previous sessions, but Pauline asked about whether they need to make a layer to add text, or can you add text to an ordinary blank document? Because you created a layer each time here.
When you use the text tool, it automatically creates a new layer to put the text on. You cannot create text on an existing layer. It always goes to a new layer, and then you have to rasterize it if you want to actually or merge the layers down. But you can put the text from a brush onto any layer, providing it's not a locked layer.
Super, super duper. Thank you. In that case, we have no further questions. I'm just going to reiterate what Danielle's just said. Celia, I'm really excited to find out you'll be continuing Marvelous Mondays. Marvelous Mondays. We were starting with magic, but now we're on to Marvelous with new content later in this year. So yes, thank you. And there's already been quite a few people jump onto that as well. So thank you very much for your support as well. But no further questions, Celia.
Right, I've got 5 minutes left. There are some other things in the pack, and you might look at them and go, wow, they look a bit complicated. You can make the most amazing brushes from poppy hairs on the stem of a poppy. So if you're doing some cloning work and you think, I'll never be able to put those hairs back in, there's quite a sophisticated set of tools on how to make a brush by using channels. But I think if you're all going to come back, hopefully on the Magic Mondays from September, there's a session on channels, and I'm going to cover it there. But what I do want to show you, and I don't know if you can see it because let me hold it against me.
I'll see if I can make you full screen for a second. There you go.
Yeah, so I am using a Wacom tablet. It's quite an old one, but I want to show you is my screen, I'm going to share my screen again.
I certainly can. There you go.
Are you doing it?
We can see your screen now.
Thank you. So on the shared screen, when you're using a brush and you have your brush settings open, you have two buttons up on the brush toolbar, and these are connected to a Wacom or any other kind of tablet that you might use. And I'm just going to attempt to use, I don't know how many people use their tablets. And if you're all out there going, I was given one for Christmas, I've thrown it in the drawer, I got sick to death of it, I just couldn't make it work. I'm going to try and persuade Mark to let me do a Wacom tablet workshop, because there are so many settings that work with Photoshop, Lightroom and Bridge and all of the other applications, which make using a tablet and pen amazing. So let me just grab an ordinary brush for a moment. I'm so confused, I can't remember what I'm doing. Where we go? Any old brush will do. Actually, right, let me use a soft round brush. Let's just move this over here for a minute. So with my mouse and a bright pink layer, and I start painting with my brush, it's the mouse that's being used. But if I pick up my tablet and let's get a new layer up. Sorry, guys, I've gone slightly over time. Are you all right?
We're okay. I think you've started a flow of people saying they want a session on tablets now. But we're not.
Hold on. Let me just put a new layer up and fill it with white. Okay, I'm going to reduce the brush size down on my keyboard. Now, any brush that you use, and this is just a straightforward, standard, soft, round brush, As soon as my tablet is activated, I'm using my pen to draw, but you'll see that nothing is very different to the way that I was working with the mouse. However, if in the brush settings, I manually change the control so that the size of the brush is controlled with the pen pressure of my tablet. And now I'm using exactly the same settings. I'm pressing very lightly. You can see that as I start to press harder, the harder I press, the larger the brush size gets up to the maximum size of the setting of that brush. We've also got two other buttons up here. This one that I'm pointing to now, which is next to the symmetry button, when this is pressed, also means that my pen takes priority over the mouse so that I can do much, much, much more in the way of interesting things. And I'm going to go over time because I just want to show you this. If I use color dynamics, I'm still using my pen, and I drag the foreground and background jitter up, and we change the color of the background color. So I'm now working with something that looks like an ice cream with color dynamics and the pen pressure active. As I click very gently and drag, I'll paint with the background color. But as soon as I start to press, oh, what's going on? It should be controlling the different, oh, it's because I've got yellow in the front and white in the back. Let me just change the background color. That's better. Let's try that again. So as I'm changing the pressure, I'm able to mix the colors just with the pressure that I'm applying with my pen. And once you learn about this sort of stuff, it just opens up a whole new world when it comes to creating textures, patterns, and the way that you work with your brush. And if you don't want to make hideous psychedelic pictures, we can forget the color dynamics for a minute. But when you're trying to work with even applying textures to the brush, the pen has the option of controlling how much texture is applied. And I want to really spend a session showing people how to do this properly, not in my normal gabbled way, but each of these can make your work so much more accurate, believe it or not. So even if you're dodging and burning, you can, and using your tablet and pen, the amount of opacity up here on the main toolbar can be controlled just by the pressure of the pen without you having to keep changing these values all the time. And here endeth my lesson.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a huge round of applause. I'll take 1 minute over. That's absolutely fine. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And I kind of love the fact we said, oh, well, we'll do this little pen session, and the response from people in the chat was wonderful. Thank you so much. So Pauline, get your tablet out of the drawer, dust it off, wipe it down, and we'll get that session organized, Celia. Fantastic.
Good. I've just seen Gina saying you can turn down the sensitivity. They're all the things that I would cover. And if you look at the pack, I've actually put a few of my old Wacom settings in as screen grabs for you to get some ideas as to what your Wacom tablet. I'm afraid I've only got experience of Wacom, but I think most of them all work in the same principles.
Yeah.
So.
Super duper. Thank you so much. Huge round of applause. Next time it's the penultimate one, isn't it?
It's the magic mixer brush, my favorite.
Fantastic.
It is anyway.
Forward to it very much.
Good.
In that case, I will see you and everybody else then. Well, I will see you and most people later on tonight as we put Sandra down.
Go and sign up now. See you later.
Take care, everybody. Have a nice
Bye.
evening. Bye-bye.